Imagine walking into a classroom, but instead of computers, notebooks, and friendly teachers, you see wooden benches, strict masters, and a stick used for punishment. 500 years ago, school was very different from today. Many children never went to school at all. Lessons were strict, mistakes could lead to punishment, and students had to memorize long texts in languages they barely understood. So, what was school really like in the 1500s? Who was allowed to study? What did students learn? And why were classrooms often places of fear rather than fun? Today, we're uncovering the shocking truth about schools 500 years ago. Around the early 1500s, education was not available to everyone. In many parts of Europe, only boys from wealthy families had regular access to formal education. Poor children often had to work with their parents instead of studying. They helped with farming, trade, or household duties. Girls also had very limited opportunities. Many girls learned skills at home instead of attending school. Some were taught reading or writing, but many were only trained for household responsibilities. Schools were often connected to religious institutions, such as the Catholic Church. These schools mainly trained boys for roles in religion, government, or administration. So education was considered a privilege, not a basic right. The subjects taught in schools 500 years ago were very different from modern education. One of the most important subjects was Latin. Latin was the language used by scholars, churches, and many official documents. Students spent hours memorizing Latin grammar and vocabulary. They also studied religious texts, basic mathematics, philosophy, classical literature. Teachers often used books written by ancient scholars. For example, many students studied the works of Aristotle and other classical thinkers. Learning relied heavily on memorization. Students repeated passages over and over until they could recite them perfectly. Creative thinking or discussion was.
Classrooms in the 1500s were simple and strict. Students usually sat on long wooden benches inside small rooms. There were no colorful posters, projectors, or digital tools. Teachers were known as schoolmasters, and they ruled the classroom with strict authority. Silence and discipline were expected at all times. If a student made too many mistakes or misbehaved, punishment was common. One tool often used was called a rod or cane. Students might be hit on the hands or back as punishment. While this seems shocking today, physical punishment was widely accepted at the time. Teachers believed strict discipline helped students learn better. A typical school day could start very early in the morning. Students often studied from sunrise until afternoon. The schedule included long periods of reading, memorizing, and reciting lessons. Breaks were short, and the classroom environment was often serious and intense. Books were rare and expensive, so students sometimes had to share them. Some students even copied entire texts by hand as part of their learning. Despite the strict rules, school was an important opportunity for social advancement. Education allowed some boys to become priests, lawyers, or government officials. During the 1500s, Europe was going through major changes. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg made books cheaper and more widely available. This slowly helped expand education. More schools began appearing in cities. Over time, new ideas about teaching and learning started to develop, but real educational reform would take many more centuries. School 500 years ago was strict, limited, and very different from what we know today. Only a small part of society had access to education. Lessons focused on memorization, discipline was harsh, and classrooms were simple. Yet, these early schools laid the foundation for the education systems we have today. And while students today may complain about homework, life in a classroom 500 years ago was often much tougher.